introduce the use of QGIS, which is an open source GIS platform for spatial analysis, and I'll show how it can work with Depthmap and also do other types of analysis that can be useful for people doing our kind of work. And this is one for people who are interested in connecting and starting to use GIS. Maybe some are already doing it and might want to consider changing to this one because it has some benefits. So I'll do a very brief overview of what it is, go through a workflow for space syntax analysis, show some of the statistics and visualization and spatial analysis features, show how you get results out for publication, and conclude with some resources. So why use AGIS? I think for those who are here, I think probably already decided that it's quite a useful thing to have anyway. So it can do a lot of stuff that you don't get out of the box in Depthmap. So it's an essential addition, I'd say essential, to the pack of tools that we use. And why I suggest, or I'm presenting QGIS, for one thing it is cross-platform, so it works on all Windows, Mac and Linux platforms. It's free, as opposed to commercial, but many other things that GISs are. In my opinion, it's the most user-friendly of them. It is quite similar to ArcGIS. For those who know one, will be very familiar with the other. Has a big user community, and it's mainly in English, which is also important. These are, I mean, I'll then make this available, this PDF, so you can see the links. You don't have to write it down now. So there are just links to get it. So just a very brief overview. As I said, I'm going to, rather than go through and explain everything in detail, just give you an overview. I think it's also because we're short of time. So the QGIS window has mainly a map window in the center, a layers panel on the left. So very similar to those who know ArcGIS or Depthmap. It works more or less the same way. It also has a toolbox on the right, so you see it's kind of really similar to ArcGIS, and various toolbars for features like deal with projects, load data files, zoom, edit object selection, edit attributes, and edit the geometry. An important thing that I'll mention briefly is the coordinate system settings. Now, another thing that it has that is very important is plugins. So QGIS leaves a lot of its plugins, and it has a really nice way of managing them. So it has a plugin manager, which is a very user-friendly tool that lists all the plugins that you have installed. You can switch them on and off, and by switching on means they go on a toolbar or on a toolbox. And it's also, it lists new ones, so you can do a search. Say, Open Layers plugin is one that I'm going to show you. So you can easily just type open on the search. It shows you the plugin, and you can install it. So it's a very user-friendly interface to managing and installing new plugins, which are really essential. So QGIS, like any other GIS, can handle multiple file formats. So that's one of the big advantages of it. So any kind of GIS file, geometric files, data file, be it PDF or CSV, etc., it's really important. So for example, I'm going to show you, as an example, loading data, street layout coming from DXF, some Google Maps from Open Layers, so we can actually load the Google Map live data from the web, which I can't because I'm not connected to the web. No. The gate counts as a shapefile, for example, etc. So just to show you, so if we go and just click open, we can start loading some of these files. Let me see. Sorry, I was opening a project. Rather than for loading vector data, you select this button. Let me just quickly load one or two files just to show you. Step one is loading data. So I mentioned, for example, pedestrian counts as a shapefile. It just loads it, so it's here. Because it's a GIS format, it knows the projection, so I haven't said anything about projections yet. Oh, actually the toolbox was hiding. Okay. Now we can see the whole thing. Or, for example, load, I'll show a different one just to show a different kind of behavior. If we load not the shapefiles, here you can select what kind of formats. As you can see, there's a huge amount of vector formats. And you can load, for example, comma-separated value files, CSV files. I know there's one somewhere. Can you see it? No? Here. Okay. Population data, for example. It actually... it's sorry. Doing live demos is never a good thing. The CSV file is actually a specific tool to do that. So because it's text, it doesn't have geometry, but it can interpret geometry data if there's any. So population, it has XY coordinates, and it immediately identifies what's the X and the Y. So when I load that, it will put them on the map. But this is the important step where the projection thing comes in. Those of you who have used GIS are familiar with this, and you have to say what coordinate system you are going to use. So it's very important from the start to decide, I'm going to work in the UK, for example. Therefore, you identify what is the UK coordinate system and you select it when you load data. GIS data already has that information, you don't need to worry. But if you load a CSV file or some other data file that is not coming from a GIS, like a DXF file, it will ask you, and the best thing is to have all the files in a similar projection system to avoid some mistakes. So here you go, we have two things, but I'm going to load a fully prepared, it's like a cooking session, I've got many things in the oven already ready-made to load. So I'm going to load the other data sets. There. So, so I've got the bus stops. I haven't got an Excel map yet, and I'm going to load. I'm just going to load, as an example, you can also load raster images, which is something you cannot do in Depthmap. So another advantage of using this thing, it's here. Just as an example, I pre-saved some Google images just in case. Like I kind of knew there wouldn't be, or I couldn't connect to the internet. So just need to say the same projection, and it should have loaded somewhere. Interesting. No image. Okay. Skip that. As usual, things don't work when you try live. So the projection system. So this is the image that we should have seen with the image on the back. So this image that you see on the back is an aerial photo of that is live from the Google map. So if you zoom in and pan, it updates. It's not like an aerial photo that you have to buy or you have to have as a separate file. It has a lot of features to color and describe the data. So as you've seen here, the polygons have been colored in green because I decided so. It has features to make labels with the data number, so you can actually see the values associated with the points, the pedestrian counts. So things typical of any GIS. And it has the zoom features, so you can zoom into the map in a specific area. So we've got all the zoom tools, the usual ones around here. Okay, so yeah, typical things. So I'll actually have to be quicker. So yeah, basic things. So because I think of the speed, I will make a lot of mistakes. I will stick to the PowerPoint from now, and I won't go to the live thing. So as in any other tool that has vector data, you can actually draw the axle lines as you would. But you have to create a layer for that, so you have to create an empty vector layer, say that it's going to have lines, say the coordinate system, and just click OK, it creates an empty layer that you can edit and draw lines. It's good that it has this live map on the back, because you can actually zoom and pan while you draw the lines. You always have the base map to refer to. You can also put in links, again create a point layer that is empty. You should add some attributes to it, because Depthmap will need XY coordinates to import the attributes, so you add them as well. They will be empty, so before exporting to Depthmap, the next step is actually to update that information. So your axle map needs to have an ID for each individual line. So there is a thing to calculate new attributes, a tool to calculate attributes, where you just say use the ID of the line as my ID, and also use the X coordinate of the geometry. So it's a rather simple thing. So once you have that information, you can export your maps for Depthmap. So you export axial map as a MIF file, because that's the file that the Depthmap reads, and you export your own links as a CSV file. So the GIS can do all those things that maybe some of you would do in Depthmap, but you can do them in QGIS as well. The important use of QGIS comes afterwards. After you've done all your processing, Depthmap you're probably familiar with. After you've done your processing, you bring it back in. And once you bring the data in, so in Depthmap you export it as a MIF file as well. So it goes in as a MIF, export in Depthmap as a MIF. Then you can import the results into QGIS, and that's where the usefulness of this tool starts. I mean, a basic thing is just seeing the results and coloring them. So it doesn't come with a color range by default like this, the one that is classic, let's call it. So you have to actually build it, but it has a nice interface to build all kinds of color ranges that you might choose. Actually, it has a very advanced symbolization or styling interface. So this is what you would get in Depthmap. This is what you get in QGIS as soon as you bring in the data. Now, one important thing about the QGIS is that to edit table attributes, and edit the geometry, you need to be using shapefile. So Depthmap uses MIF files. When you bring it in, it's a MIF file. You have to save it as a shapefile. One problem that Depthmap has, it has very long column names. So this is T1024 choice radius something metric, and when you convert that to a shapefile, it cuts the names to 10 characters. So one thing, the shapefile only supports 10 characters per attribute, which is a rather annoying limitation. So one thing you should do before using shapefile is renaming all your columns, because the MIF file reads everything nicely. You can see the column names here are complete. But as soon as you save the shapefile, this won't be readable. So you need to use Table Manager to rename these. I know it's annoying, but hopefully then the benefits of using the GIS will be obvious. So what you should do that once you get the things into QGIS again, things that you might not be able to do in Depthmap, one important thing is just look at the summary statistics of your data and also the distribution of your data. If you look at choice, for example, you can see a power law distribution with a very, very long tail of high values, very few high values and a lot of small values. Why is this important, to know this information? It's essential to know your data, know your results. Many people in Depthmap, because they don't see this kind of image, they don't really understand the numbers behind the colors. They just color things. They might see the table, but it's essential to get an understanding for this kind of thing. So doing basic statistics, knowing what your maximum and minimum is, the range or standard deviation. Also knowing, you might find strange things and spot errors by doing this. If you see negative values as the minimum or something like that, you might start thinking that you have some kind of problem. And this is also important because of the coloring. As you know, in Depthmap, it does equal ranges, so every interval has an equal size to do the colors, and it's totally unsuitable for this kind of distribution, because everything will be blue. So a lot of people who do choice get a blue map and say, oh, the results didn't work. This is the reason, because of that distribution. So one thing you do in QGIS, you can actually choose different types of color ranges to adapt to different kinds of distributions and different kinds of data. So that's an essential thing about QGIS or GIS in general, is allowing you to visualize different types of data in a richer way and adapt your visualization to the data. So this is the different maps you get if you do, for example, equal range, natural breaks, or quantiles. Quantiles with 10 ranges is actually a very useful visualization because each band corresponds to 10% of the data. So when we're talking about the top 10%, we know that in this map, the top 10% of the data is the red lines. So it's not like, in this map, we don't really know the middle one. We don't really know what each band corresponds to. We can say, oh, these are the most integrated or the highest choice lines, but here it's more accurate. We can also look at scatter plots, although this has to be a custom tool because it doesn't have one at the moment, but more on that later. For example, selecting the integration core that I've just mentioned. As I said, by default, if you did quantiles, this band corresponds to the integration core. If you read that number, you can actually filter out any lines that are below that value, so you actually get only the lines of the integration core. You can even store that information as an attribute. So the same way we added the x and the y coordinates, we can also add a column called integration core and say all lines that are part of the core have a value of 1. So you say all the selected features will get a value of 1. So later on, you can actually do maps where you only select or only show integration core more easily. So those lines become identified. This is, again, a very essential feature of GIS. You've got your data, but you start characterizing it. It's not just about the integration values or the choice values. It's about adding attributes that really describe what the data is about, differentiate different types of data, elements in your data. So, so far this was like standard space syntax features and queries, but I think it already expands a bit what you would normally get just by using Depthmap, because it has better visualization features, it has better statistical or at least richer statistical analysis features. But then, if you have other data sets, which is the important thing about the GIS, loading all those data sets at the beginning, you can start playing with them to query and inquire other things about your study. For example, if you've got your pedestrian counts, there is a contour plugin. You can just do density or pedestrian count contours that highlight in just a different way the movement levels in your area. It's just a different visualization technique, but shows you where the high movement streets are as opposed to the low, quiet areas are. So a range of visualization features is definitely one of the things one can use the GIS for. There's also features, for example, to associate these, the tool to link the points to the nearest object, and you use that, for example, to link the points of the pedestrian counts to the nearest line. So you can then start doing all the correlations of movement. And I'm saying the pedestrian counts, it could be an entrance to a building, it could be the building shapes, it could be land use points, it could be any kind of feature linked to the nearest line. And so once you have that, you can start again. So this is just showing you the steps. I'm not going to go into the details, but there's like a tool that will. So there's a tool which is called nearest hub that will create these lines to link to the nearest object, and then you can join the attributes of the lines and the attributes of the pedestrian counts to have everything together to do, for example, your correlations. So in this case, I mean, this is just a demo. I'm not expecting anything fancy in terms of results, but just to show you, and then you get your scatter plot by linking all the data sets together. Now, another thing you can do, you saw that I have those polygons that represent census areas, and I have my population data. The census areas didn't have any attributes, but again, the GIS allows with spatial joins to get all this information together, and so I get all my population data aggregated on the census area, so I get population data there. I can also aggregate my spatial data of the network onto the census area, for example, by averaging choice and integration on the census area. And by doing that, I have, again, a different map. I can see my census areas colored according to population. So in this case, I've used elderly people, so the highest number of elderly residents. But you can also do the integration map, so the highest mean integration in each census area. And eventually try again another type of correlation. So aggregating things at a higher level, and this is the way you get actually the combination of different data sets to allow you to further explore and make a better use of your spatial model. Quite often we end up in Depthmap, and we've seen a lot of presentations, just image after image of the Depthmap screenshot. And it's like the GIS actually allows you to take it much, much further by associating that rich network data that you have, those rich results, and start linking it to many other phenomena quite easily. So, another example. So I have those population points, but I can actually, so here I aggregated up. So I have the census areas. So I've got those zones, and I joined everything together in each census area. But one might argue, oh, but that's very low resolution. We want to have a richer representation of the population or integration in this area. So we can actually, instead of aggregating up, we can take the population to every axial segment or axial line. In this case, I've decided to create a heat map of those points of population to create a kind of density landscape of the area. So by using this heat map plugin, I can generate this kind of landscape. So the dots represent the population, and the intensity of the color represents the number of residents, in this case again elderly residents, so we can clearly see where higher concentrations of elderly people are. And so this is a raster map, this is a grid, so another type of data, another type of format that the GIS supports. Now this is overlaid over the lines. They are very light grey, you can hardly see them, but they are there. And what I can do is kind of send the values or the mean value of the cells that intersect each line. So I can send the grid information to my segments or my lines, and then I have the population data loaded on my spatial network, so I know a value of density on each segment. So what we had before was this very crude aggregation at the higher scale, but you can also have this much richer and detailed image of the density. So what I can do then, there's a tool called point sampling, which I create points. Very hard to see. So I created a small point on every segment. So it's like the center of every segment line. So it's my sampling. So every segment has a point that will read the value of the cell where it is located, and that value gets associated with the segment. So these are my sample points with population value, and I can just get rid of the ones that have null. So for example, all the yellow ones I've selected because they have no population data because they are outside the map. And again, once I have got this, so the green points have population data and they've got all the integration and choice value data. So I can again do another map, this one with a lot of points of data, because the previous ones had like 60 or 70 data points. This one is much richer. Again, rubbish results, but that is not the purpose. It's really just to show the potential of doing these things. So actually, we're almost done with the overview. So the final thing after you do all these analysis is actually getting the results out. I mean, in Depthmap usually you just copy-paste the screen if you want vector format, or you save an image. Here, what you get is a thing called a print composer, where you actually lay out, so you prepare the map window with all the layers that you want, which is underneath here, and then with the print composer, it's a kind of a publishing tool that it has, where you start putting all the information that you want to see printed, starting obviously with what format you want, and what resolution you want. So if it's for a journal, usually they ask, actually they want very high resolution, so it's good that you can actually control how much you get there. Then you start adding a map window by clicking on the map button. You just drag and draw the map window that you want to have the map that you've prepared. And you can add other things like the north arrow and scale, which is something that also misses most of the maps that we see from spacing that's taken from Depthmap, because Depthmap doesn't do that. And it's sometimes a shame that we're looking at maps of colored lines, but we actually have no idea what the scale is of what that represents. And I think it's quite important when people zoom into a map, actually for us to have some kind of awareness, is this 1 kilometer or 10 kilometers? And so I actually think going through this stage and preparing these maps with this information is kind of quite essential. A useful thing to say is that once you prepare these things, you can save the layout as a template and reload it in some other project. So that you can store these as templates, and if the map is different, it just loads the new map that keeps all the, I call these decorations, and the north arrow and the legends. So it's quite flexible, because you can actually put many other things. You can put also images I didn't show here. So if you have a logo, so if it is for a presentation, you want to include some logos of a municipality, for example, you can also include those on the map, etc. And of course, another thing that often is missing is the legend of what the map is showing. So again, it has many features to load the legend, and very importantly also edit. For example, you can remove or add some items on the legend or rename them. So here I add an underscore, but I don't want the underscore to show. I can just edit the name of that, so the final legend is clean of that, and only shows the levels of the data that I'm interested in showing. And then you can save it. Now saving, it does, the only vector format that it supports is the PDF, but actually you can open it in Illustrator. So if you want to, for some reason, do further editing, or if you want to have the nice crisp quality of vector images, you can do the PDF format, and then it has many raster formats like JPEG, PNG, TIFF, the usual things, and they obey the resolution that you set at the beginning. So that's a useful thing. So this is kind of the result that you get, which is a lot more informative than just a string graph of a map. So this gave us an overview of it. It does. I know it was very quick, but I think I mean at this time anyway, we really don't want to go into too much detail. So important things, as I said, I'm going to send it to you. Don't worry about writing down these things. There is some links to useful documentation. For the more adventurous, there's even a QGIS cookbook, so if you want to write your own plugins. As I said, it lives a lot from plugins, and as I said also, we'll come to that in a minute. This is just a list of some essential plugins that I've used during this presentation. So the analysis and the images that I've shown you made use at some point or another of one of these plugins. And there's a lot more. I just find this quite essential to have when you install the tool. And there's another important thing in GIS is data, and there has been a lot of discussion about big data yesterday, and the worry about data not being open and being closed. But luckily there are more and more resources of open data. Here I list some very important ones that are either for the world or Europe, but mostly what might cover the whole world. So wherever you are, you might find some useful datasets for your area of study in one of these websites. So to conclude, so as I've shown you, QGIS is capable of supporting most of the general and usual GIS and spatial analysis operations, which is a richer set of operations than you find in Depthmap. So it kind of expands the results, and the results of Depthmap benefit from being transferred and added and manipulated for analysis and visualization in a GIS. Now, QGIS is not as comprehensive or user-friendly as ArcGIS. So I know that people who already use ArcGIS, they will not necessarily want to switch. But QGIS is free. So some people actually use ArcGIS but teach using QGIS, because for the students it's much more quickly and readily available. And so it is also very much used as the GIS teaching platform. And I've seen over the last few months more and more courses and workshops and tutorials dealing with QGIS. Now QGIS, despite all these things that might seem, oh, this is marvelous, it does everything you might need, actually it is not very user-friendly in some respects, and it has many gaps of things that in our workflow could be improved. So those first steps that I showed you, creating the Excel map, adding those attributes, exporting, importing, this is actually quite cumbersome, and there are many steps there that don't work as smoothly. For example, the one of renaming all the columns. If you get from Depthmap like 20 columns to rename, and if you have many maps coming in, you have to do it every time. I wouldn't want to do that. So what's happening is that I've recently started working at the Bartlett School of Graduate Studies at UCL, and what I'm involved in is a project to develop a toolkit of these plugins that I've shown you for spatial network analysis to integrate QGIS and Depthmap. So what I'll be working on in the next year, or less than a year now, is developing plugins specifically for us to facilitate this integration and to help people use Depthmap and do spatial index analysis to encourage and facilitate this transition and the calculations in Depthmap that are almost seamless. For example, one of the ideas is having a tool that actually we prepare the data in QGIS, and then it goes to Depthmap. You just in QGIS you say what kind of analysis you want to do. It sends the data and returns the results without even having to open Depthmap. So you get the results back and column names with proper names that you don't have to edit. So that will be one of the key, I would say, the main tool. But we're planning several others. So I think I've said already why the limitations and advantages of QGIS. And this project is a community project, so QGIS is an open source, and open sources are for the community and by the community. And so this project of plugins for QGIS is the same. So yes, Tassos and myself are sort of a core team of developers doing this integration and this development. And at UCL there is a core team of people actually testing and supporting the development. But you, the Space Index community, of course, has also a big role to play, because you ultimately will be users and testers of this. And who knows, maybe also developers, because I know that you work in universities that have capacity and people with those skills. And because everything is open and relatively and accessible. So at the end of this first phase of development, we will create an open source project in GitHub, most likely, with all the source code of all the tools. And this is because this is for the community. People will be encouraged to use and contribute, also add plugins to it or fix plugins, because programmers are not gods and they do a lot of mistakes. So also help to keep this development going. But the main thing is really, this is it's starting at the core, but this is a big project for a lot of people to use and to contribute. So thank you. Sorry for rushing it, but I decided to make it short. And so if you have any questions or suggestions.
George.
Yeah.
I thought the bus driver would have to leave without me, so.
Okay. But we still have some time for questions, because I made it quick. I don't know if there's any questions.
One question.
Yeah. Just switch on the light. I think the light is here. Yeah.
When you were trying to link the population data to the segment line, and you said you select a point, and then you ask it to link the closest data point.
Yeah.
Is it just 1 point per segment line? Because if it's a longer segment line and you have different values, if you have a lesser value on one side.
One line can have more than 1 point, yes, and then you have just to decide. In this case, I summed it because I wanted the total population per point. So, but 1 point in this case only has 1 segment. So this population gets associated with the nearest segment. The segment itself can have more than 1 point. That's how I did it. But this is, like I said, a demonstration of possibilities. But this is exactly the kind of operations. So you have points to transfer the data to lines, lines to polygons, raster images, even, or raster analysis to lines, etc., etc., etc. So it's more this flexibility. at the start of this project, to help identify the types of tools that are needed, I go through a requirements phase where I meet and interview a few people that use the tools or don't use but would like to. And one of the things that came out of one of those interviews is that they say researchers have to be creative. I mean, this is an amazing toolkit. I will do some very streamlined workflows for those specific things that everyone does, like the Depthmap analysis. You have to go through a series of steps, so I might as well facilitate that as much as possible in an integrated way workflow. But then the rest is for you guys to explore. The tools are there, and they can do many kinds of analysis.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Just how do you push out a copy of your PDF?
Sorry?
Leave it somewhere, the PDF? Is it you're going to
I'm going to send on the mailing list. I don't know if everyone is on the mailing list. Otherwise,
Can I get a copy from PowerPoint?
you can copy. Yeah, you can get the copy now if you want.
You could put it on the website of the Symposium,
yeah.
just like the proceeding site.
I think it
Yeah. I mean, what do you think?
Give it
PDF
to-
file for download.
that is always possible. So.
Because that's the proceedings, like adding it to the end or something.
Right. Okay.
And then everybody can access.
Sure.
Okay, so that's maybe the easiest. Thank you.
Sorry, I missed the third part. Is this QGIS stronger than the normal GIS, or is that for simplified analysis for spacing tasks?
Sorry. The actual spacing test analysis, it doesn't do it. It's
We can transfer the Depthmap data into GIS, but
Yeah.
it's analysis complicated.
sorry.
We can transfer the data from Depthmap into GIS.
Yeah.
So I mean, if we do that step, all of the functions are same, or this one is stronger.
It's stronger than ArcGIS, you mean? Or no, it's not stronger than ArcGIS.
So if I transfer it and then use GIS and other thing, or not?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, they're very similar.
What you are asking is if the values that come from Depthmap
Yeah.
into GIS are
Yeah.
exactly the same.
Yeah.
Oh, of
The only
course,
you can see it in many different places.
And do many more things with
The
it.
point in using QGIS is open source based or small platform.
Yeah, exactly. And I forgot to stress that ArcGIS actually only works on Windows. So anyone using Mac or Linux can actually have. I mean, that's when I changed to Mac. I decided I have to use this one, and it was a push. Actually, I also mentioned that the development team of this, it's free, it's cross-platform, it's open source, and the development team is great. I mean, this new version 2 that came out a month ago gives a big jump towards being more similar and more integrated, more user-friendly, like ArcGIS. There's still a long way to go, but with more plugins like the ones I intend to make, and I'm sure that the developers are all the time working on it to make it. I see a very good, promising development with this software. That's why I chose it. I've been using it for 3 or 4 years, and the growth and development of it has been incredible, really incredible. As opposed to, for example, MapInfo, which I've used for maybe 10 years, and the development has been almost non-existent in those 10 years. It developed a bit, had a few nice features recently, but still, it feels like you're in the 90s, the software. This is much more modern, for example, than MapInfo.
Someday we may have an extension to do spatial syntax analysis in QGIS.
Yeah.
If you try hard.
I mean, like I said, the integration with Depthmap, it's guaranteed. That will exist by next summer, the latest.
And what is it about the speed problem? Based on script language, it takes lots of
No,
time.
but listen, it's the Depthmap engine. So what will happen is it's still an engine of Depthmap. So the speed is Depthmap speed. The interface is QGIS.
Well, simply speaking, if you are in QGIS,
Yes.
you draw your map or whatever, and then you push a button, simply speaking, it sends it without being seen. It sends it to Depthmap, gets it analyzed, brings it back, and gives you the colors and everything. So Depthmap is very fast in analysis, so you don't lose that speed. Yeah. Unless, in future you develop specific tools within GIS, which is better than that map, then that's a different matter.
Right.
But you don't lose that speed.
Sorry,
I mean, another thing that it does.
Something to, you can press a button and get the Depthmap analysis. And
That's the way
that's
it's going to be done.
That's the
And
one of the
it has not been done yet, but that's the idea.
Symbolized already?
Well,
What's the question?
ask the question.
Would it be already symbolized when it gets back to QGIS?
Like the colors and...
Based on
I think I will add a simplified symbolization feature. It can come symbolized, but that's a bit irrelevant. What I'll do is a toolbar, because the symbolization is quite, I say it's very powerful, but a bit tricky. So I will definitely also have a tool to more simply symbolize, everybody's just sleeping. Yeah. So it will just more easily symbolize all the things that you. One nice thing about Depthmap is that you click on a measure and it immediately shows you the symbolized version of it, and you can swap. And in a GIS, each time you want to see an attribute, you have to symbolize it, and that's annoying. So all these things that I find annoying, I will work hard on them, and that's one of them. To make it very quick to symbolize.
I think because every time I do the analysis, I look at the Depthmap and then I can never symbolize it in the same way, and and it seems like, okay, am I doing something wrong? Why am I not seeing the same map?
Well, let's put it this way. I don't necessarily agree that or see that symbolization in Depthmap is ideal. So I wouldn't personally aim to have the same symbolization as in Depthmap. If I create one that is exactly the same, I can even have a button that creates by default the Depthmap symbolization. But it's something to consider.
I think that's not what you were asking, was it? You have this problem of losing the symbolization because, you move the sliders, and the next time you're not completely sure what was the position of the sliders.
That as well, but also in QGIS you have those several ways of visualizing the equal, the natural breaks, whatnot.
Yeah,
it never looks like Depthmap.
And I guess I don't know how Depthmap is based.
It's equal ranges.
It's equal ranges. It's just
equal ranges. Yeah.
So Depthmap is equal ranges, but the sliders means you cut the top and bottom ranges.
Yeah, exactly. The sliders. Now I remember.
So that's why it's difficult.
Not really a direct translation between the two, and you never know whether or not.
Okay, but you can save that in GIS. You can make your symbolization and then save it. I guess in ArcGIS.
Yeah, you can. You can.
As a layer file.
Here of course you can and load it.
Yeah.
The other thing you can is you can create an equal ranges and then transfer that to a rule base, which is another type that I only briefly. I think I skipped that one, and tweak the values of the top and bottom to do a similar kind of thing. But as I said, many of these steps in QGIS at the moment require some steps. So I definitely want to have a simplified symbolization tool to have more like the standard things that we do. And I think if there's no more questions, we can wrap up the session. Any more?
Thank you very much.
And you can always email me. Not too much, but.
So, you can send